With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And the reason why there are so many of us is I'm fortunate enough today to be joined by 7 of our really great experts at Datassential. We'll introduce them as they join us in the various sections, and they're going to be talking to us about some of the big things we've learned throughout the course of the pandemic. So today is a little bit of a review, a lot of looking forward, but these are sort of these 7 big lessons. And we'll call this the Magnificent 7 for now, the 7 big things we've learned through the pandemic. Before we get started, just a couple of quick reminders. Number 1, please remember that the next webinar takes place on a Thursday, which is July 9th. So that's after the holiday weekend. It'll be Thursday at noon Central. So will not be on Friday at 2 p.m. It will be Thursday, July 9th at noon Central. And this webinar now moves to an every other week format going forward. We'll probably still talk about COVID a little bit from time to time, but we're going to bring in some other really important topics too, with some guest presenters as well. So please mark your calendar. Please also know that Zoom does not automatically update your calendar for you. So you're going to have to go into Outlook or whatever, Gmail or whatever you use, Google Calendar, and set your own like recurring thing for every 2 weeks on Thursday at noon, starting on July 9th. Today's topic are the 7 lessons of a pandemic, and we're just going to go through them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And to get us started, the very first lesson is goodbye fear, hello caution. So what does this mean? Well, I think if you think back to the very early days of the pandemic, and it's not like we have perfect information now, right? You know, there's still a lot of confusion about how exactly things are transmitted, what's safe, what's not safe. It's not crystal clear, but if you think back to those very, very first days and weeks, people were basically just sort of paralyzed and, you know, in place, right? You had no idea. And so they were in a mindset of fear, right? Mindset of fear, you know, the example we always use is like if you have the weird noise you hear at 2 in the morning, you're home alone at night, it's dark, and some irrational part of you says, oh my God, is there a homicidal maniac with a chainsaw in the other room? Like that's just irrational fear. And I think that's a place where many of us were socially. But we've gone from that to from a mindset of fear to a mindset of caution instead, which is a really positive thing, right? We've gone from the irrationality of being sort of paralyzed and not knowing what to do to saying, you know what? Okay, I've been doing this for a little while now. I get it. And now I have some strategies and decisions that I can make and take agency in my actions and control my fate a little bit. So with that, I'd like to bring in our first presenter, Kara. Are you there, Kara?
Yes, I am here.
And she's going to talk to us about some of the things we've learned about as we get into this cautious mindset and what it means for safety and how consumers are thinking. Kara's actually led the team here on doing the one table research that many of you have participated in as well. And she knows a heck of a lot about the stuff. So Kara, let's do this thing where, because I'm controlling the slides, if you go,
beep.
If you want, you did that very meekly. I think you like amplify that. Beep, you know.
Beep. All right.
There we go. All right,
okay.
That's the first one. We'll keep at it. Let's go.
All right. So this is, like Jack said, a little bit from our one table research. Here we ask consumers what kinds of places that they'll think are safe after their restrictions are lifted. So we're seeing some of that play out in real time. Restaurants with outdoor seating, definitely seen as safe, and most of the places that are open are allowing that patio seating. Fast food, we've been kind of going there all the time anyway. It's really about avoiding crowds. You can maintain your distance a little bit better at these types of places that we see here at the top. But looking at the bottom of the list, cruises, concerts, stadiums, all these big group type items are, not seen as safe, probably are going to have a pretty slow recovery. So when we think about those types of places, especially like buffet style restaurants, there's going to need to be a little bit of reinvention there. We've seen, for example, in buffets, there's you know, like an app that the customer can, you know, design their plate ahead of time and a staff member will assemble it for them. So there's, you know, a lot less contact with the food and not having to worry about groups of people up there, you know, at the buffet.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Kara, we're not certainly not saying that some of these areas at the bottom are, you know, hopeless or anything of the sort of. It's
Mm-mm.
just that if you operate in one of those areas, there probably is, as you said, some wholesale reinvention that needs to happen that'll make consumers feel comfortable. Whereas if you're sort of toward the top of this list, yeah, you're probably more or less good to just do what you're doing right now, right? You still want to emphasize safety, but you don't have to completely reinvent the experience the same way the stuff at the bottom would have to.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
think, yeah, like people, you know, we're cautiously optimistic in that phase right now. We kind of feel better about taking care of ourselves. So like these places at the top, maybe we can keep ourselves safe, but it's really like those crowds and the places at the bottom that are causing people to worry more.
and this might be me just not understanding, like, you know, fashion trends, but does it not look like this person has a different nail polish on exactly one finger? And is that like a thing right now?
It's a thing. Yes.
Good thing. Okay, fair enough. That shows how behind the times I am. This is something we've seen before, but I think, and again, much of today's content will be a retrospective on some of the really big things we've learned, but we're hoping to put it in context of what it all means going forward. But you want to talk to us about this, Kara?
Yeah, so this is looking at the top considerations when selecting a place to eat, you know, after coronavirus, after the pandemic. So kind of about where we are now. And I think that, you know, the restaurant being clean was probably always, you know, on people's minds, but definitely not, you know, top of the list as it is now. So it's really kind of the lens that, you know, people are looking at their whole consideration set through when they make their decision. So number one, it has to be clean. Then all these other things that are important, the taste, the value, the service, come in after that. So, you know, if it's not clean, it's kind of just going to be thrown out where, you know, maybe people would have budged on that a little bit before, but now, you know, they're just worried about getting the virus. And that's where we kind of talk about a lot on these webinars, this overt sanitation. People want to see everything being wiped down all the time.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've sort of said like cleanliness and sanitation normally would never be at the top of this list, right? Historically, great taste is number one. Convenience is maybe sort of right there, number two. Now that's totally shifted, but the way we would think about cleanliness and sanitation is probably more as a filter than as a sort, right? It's like you don't have to be the world's cleanest store or the world's cleanest restaurant. You just have to be clean enough for someone and comfortably clear that hurdle. But you just have to clear that hurdle. You don't have to be like the best in class necessarily. Whereas for taste, that's more like a sort, right? People say, well, what's the best tasting restaurant? What's number two, number three? And they'll pick the one that's most craveable to them. But for cleanliness and sanitation, it's just a high bar that has to be met, but all you have to do is meet that bar. Now that said, probably, you know, most businesses have a lot more to do to actually meet that standard. But it's more of a filter mechanism than a sort mechanism, whereas stuff like taste and convenience, that's probably more like a sort.
Yeah, it definitely still has to be craveable.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're not going to really be willing to sacrifice their safety just because it's craveable. Yeah. Beep.
There you go. I'm ahead of you on this one.
Sorry. Yeah. So really, you know, I think when we talk about like the fear at first and the anxiety, there's kind of like a little bit of trauma residual from, you know, that heightened sense of anxiety, like being scared to go outside. So, you know, what we're seeing here is the majority of people, 76%, say that the restaurant being clean and being safe is going to always matter more. So I would definitely put myself in this camp that I feel very aware, you know, of what is happening around me when, you know, the few times that I do go out, if people are close to me, if I see things being clean, because there's just like a little bit of just that residual, like we're almost talking about it like PTSD, like, okay, is this place safe? Is this going to matter? This is, you know, going to still matter in the future. Definitely top of mind right now, but we think it'll probably still be in the back of people's heads, even in the long term. just being worried about not getting sick and wanting to feel really safe.
Yeah, I think that PTSD analogy, is it an analogy? Is that a metaphor? I don't know what the right term is for that, is really sort of spot on, right? A lot of times people say things and it may or may not be true in the future. Like, I think I'm going to think this way a year from now. And you have to sort of interpret those numbers. Here, I think when you have this many people saying this will always matter more to me than it did before, there probably is just, a psychological reason for that. Think of how traumatizing the last several weeks have been for people, and those individual moments that maybe they've gathered during that time that just like sticks out in their mind. The next time they see like a dirty bathroom or a condiment counter that's sort of sticky and gross, even if that's a year off in the future or 2 or 3 years, that might trigger like that memory of what's been going on the last few weeks. And I think that means that this number actually sort of sticks in a way that, let's say, other future looking numbers don't. So I actually think that is a pretty good comparison. I can maybe just talk to this. We have a service called Brand Fingerprints, and we could look at how consumers rate different restaurant chains. In this case, we have it for C-stores and for grocery stores as well, across lots of different metrics, one of which is cleanliness. And each one of these bars here is a different restaurant chain. And you can see that there's a pretty big range, right? Percentage that say, hey, it's really great, the cleanliness there. Like the best chain scores an 81. And at the opposite end of the spectrum, it's just a 35. It's not like they're all sort of together. I mean, there's a huge range. So you do want to think about this as a potential differentiator for the stores, the restaurants, the convenience stores that people are going to select in the future.
So this is really interesting. There's a really big shift here from the onset of the pandemic to here at the beginning of June of what people are most concerned about when it comes to their safety. So it went from what you're touching to the being really close to other people. So I think that there's been a lot of education maybe or lack thereof about surfaces, and people are just, really accustomed to washing their hands all the time and trying not to touch their faces when they're out. So the risk of, contracting the virus from just touching things has become pretty low. And now it's really shifted to being, a proximity thing. So this is pretty positive though for getting back to normal. If you're, constantly worried about touching everything, that's probably going to stick with you for a long time. But, being around other people as a society, we can't just stop doing that.
Yeah, it is sort of interesting. Like the notion of touching something, it has this like historic time element to it, right? Like if you touch something that someone touched an hour, a minute, a day, a couple weeks before, like that might feel potentially contagious to you. We've moved away from that thought where now you only have to worry about what's physically happening next to me right now, not, what's the whole history of this object that I'm interacting with. And I will say too, I remember like for a while, like people were being really cognizant of not touching their face. But for all of you that do like a, Zoom, call or a video call with your colleagues or family members or whoever your friends, you'll notice that people are touching their faces like nonstop all the time now. I think like we're not as guarded about that anymore. In fact, one of us may be touching our faces right now. And maybe you can spot it. How about self-serve, Kara?
Yeah, so this is the perceived safety of these self-serve areas, going forward. And we're, not a whole lot is really seen as safe. So, this is just kind of interesting to look at for the future, what innovation could potentially come out of, this whole issue that can make, some of this stuff become touchless, or will people just eventually become more comfortable and not worry, about some of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so reaching into a beverage cooler, getting a can or a bottle, that's more or less safe to people. But you have like a majority number saying, I'm not so sure about a lot of these other.
It's kind of like these open container type situations, I think, that people feel a lot less comfortable with, especially if lots of people can be around there. Yeah.
And you see a lot of restaurants actually already moving away from these types of things. So that will likely continue to happen, at least for the near to intermediate term. How about some stickers?
Yeah, so really this is, what could we do to help packaging or, make people more comfortable? And really for consumers, it's about a tamper-proof seal. So this is just something like super cheap, super easy, that restaurants and manufacturers can provide, for their customers. It's a good branding opportunity. So just to help people feel safe, at least for the time being, it's just super, super easy.
Yeah, I've not done much studying on, sticker pricing recently, but I imagine it costs like 1 to 2 pennies to slap a sticker on something. It's probably not terribly expensive, and it brings a lot of just, confidence back to the consumer. I ordered food from another place the other day where instead of stickers, they had those plastic clamshell types of containers for food. They stapled them shut, which effectively does the same thing, right? It became a little bit of a pain. It's not as bad as like the plastic packaging for, retail products where you have to like rip that thing apart and you cut yourself and there's all sorts of blood, in the process. But it was actually relatively easy to open. But look, if you're ordering delivery, you don't want to think that the driver maybe, is incentivized to stick his hand in there and grab a French fry or something. This is like a 1 to 2 penny, way of getting around that. So making the consumer feel much more comfortable. Kara, thank you. And with that, we'd like to go into the second lesson, which is that just we as people and certainly those in the food industry and food business owners and restaurants are really capable of extreme adaptation, that we can move really quickly and do some pretty amazing things on short notice. So we have Mike and Renee that are going to speak a little bit about this. Guys, same rules, just give me that boop, and I'll keep moving the slides along for you.
Sounds good, Jack. Well, one of the things that we've been seeing a lot is family meals. And I think that is definitely one of those things that's going to continue even after everything kind of settles down. It's still just a really convenient way to get people a good amount of food for a good number of people. And there's nothing that's like crazy about it either. So we saw this with Easter, where we had that roasted duck. We have Mother's Day. We saw a lot of these meal kits as well. And something that's going to continue, I think, for holidays and special occasions, so that consumers can still kind of feel like they're getting something nice for a celebration. So this was Father's Day. On the left, there's a grilling kit from Oak Steakhouse in Charleston. So that one was cool because it has the meats, obviously, it has the restaurant signature sauces, and then it also has a little steak knives and also meat thermometer. So just kind of getting people everything they might need to create that special dinner.
Does
and
this
then
give
on the right,
meat, or do you have to come up with your own side dishes? Or
I mean, you could just eat the steak and the sauces, which I would totally be fine with. I'd eat the whole thing, all 5 or whatever for myself. So, and then on the right there is from 5 Dot Ranch in Napa, California, and just having a variety of different grill kits too, with fun things like t-shirts and whatnot as well.
Yeah, awesome. Is it time for that boop?
Boop. Yeah.
Good deal. This is kind of along the similar line. This is a catering operation out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And they were called Seasons to Taste. And then obviously when COVID hit, they weren't doing as much catering. So they changed their name to Seasons to Go, and they became a consumer-facing operation. So they've been doing things like this. This was their Father's Day package that they did. You could get smoked chicken wings, bone-in ribeyes. And like Renee said, I think we've just seen how creative the industry is. And any of those creative ideas that really resonated with consumers are going to stick around for a while. I know that when we tested the meal kits with consumers, it was like 76% of consumers who had tried them during COVID said that they're going to continue doing them. So I think we're just going to see some of this stuff stick around for a while.
I wonder if you go to Google Trends and search for the word pivot, if you see like a giant spike in March and April or something.
Oh, yeah.
How about this one?
Yeah, so this is, and actually, oh, I thought they had branded face masks, but I guess not. But so something that we've seen too a lot is contactless menus and QR codes. So even though it kind of seemed like QR codes were really big a few years ago, and then they kind of just went away, now it's becoming a really good tool for restaurants for their menus. So on the right there is Replay in Chicago, and I actually went there a few weeks ago and was looking for their menu. And of course, you just, go up there and just have your camera out and just look at the QR code, and then it brings up their website with their menus. Same thing on the left there is a pub in Canada where that's also really common. And just a really good way for operators. They don't have to worry about reprinting menus, sanitizing menus, throwing all that paper out and stuff too. And I think, Mike, you were saying too, it might help with environmental concerns, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we will get back to that, where, right now consumers understand that restaurants have to adapt, and maybe, they're, having some of that disposable packaging because they have to. But I think in the next few months, you're going to see consumers say that, they're interested in sustainable options.
Yeah, and you think about like how much time like some of these changes would normally take, like just something, people sitting in meetings and like dilly-dallying and just stewing on a decision. Here it's like all the decisions just happen all at once. And you see this, even like working with some chain restaurants, you see it with innovation. They're like, things that would have normally taken us 9 months or 12 months to do, we've done them like 3 or 4 weeks all of a sudden, or even less than that in some cases. I think sometimes it's just like, hey, if you got to do it, you figure out a way to do it, which is exactly what we've seen.
Right.
Yeah, actually Disney has rolled out QR codes at their restaurants in Florida. And they've actually found other reasons why it works. I know they have different QR codes for different languages. So you can scan a particular QR code and get it in a different language if you want.
Yeah, we're all basically living right now in a matrix of billions of different beta tests, but it's cool. We're seeing some interesting innovation come out of this.
Yeah. And this is super cool. This is Ladybird Cafe in LA. And so I think in the beginning we saw some of those like really wacky ideas, people having those like inner tube tables and the pool noodles and all of that type of stuff, dummies in restaurants. And, I think a lot of people thought that was going to go away or not really have too much staying power. But this is really cool. These are little greenhouses at this cafe. So instead of, just putting out some tables in the parking lot and not having too much ambiance, there's these little pods almost that you can dine in. I mean, this is super cute. I would dine here, What is you, Mike?
So I'd like to ask everyone watching, and if you could share your thoughts in chat. So I think this is where we might have like an internal disagreement, because I personally have a hard time seeing this really being a thing in the long run. I know Renee and Mike, you think that this, I guess it could work, right? If it's more not just for, COVID in the future, but it gives you like a private dining space.
Yeah, I like that it's a little, like it's a safe bubble, and it's a little more picturesque too. And I think it helps with weather as well. So, a lot of these outdoor dining is going to really depend on the weather. So I don't know, maybe in the winter there could be something that, a form of this that morphs and keeps you still toasty in the winter,
You know what? That is a cool idea. Like if you could be in that while it's raining and the rain is sort of all around you. It's like, as a kid, you never like sit in the cars that went through the car wash? Sort of like the car wash, the adult dining version of that. That's a great idea. Okay. Yeah. You've changed my mind.
Yeah.
Well, those were kind of popular even before COVID. I mean, we had looked at some for the company on the Chicago Riverwalk, but they were outrageously expensive last summer.
Oh, they were doing that pre-COVID?
Yeah, pre-COVID, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Those little
and then another lesson just that we've seen more recently is we're kind of moving into this era of enforcement and kind of the pain points that come with it. So, Colleen was talking about Vegas earlier this week, and things are moving so fast that this actually is kind of a moot point right now. But last week, they Caesars Entertainment Group decided that they would give $20 away to anybody wearing a mask in order to kind of, take that carrot approach instead of a stick approach. Now in Vegas, you actually have to wear a mask. They just changed the rules. So, but I think, it's a lesson that a lot of operators can learn. You have somebody that comes into your operation. They're not wearing a mask. It makes people uncomfortable. Maybe you just offer them a free drink and you say, hey, if you put that mask on, I'll give you a coffee or something like that.
I wonder if they can make a mask that has like a little like opening where you can stick a straw in and it sort of seals around the straw so you can just drink through the mask. I feel like you could do that, right?
I feel like you have a lot of mask ideas, Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could start a whole
Next big
line.
thing. Yeah. Thanks for that. And Mike, Renee, we're going to bring you back in just a moment. But Mark, if you're there, I was wondering if you could tell us about this third big lesson, which is just that COVID has accelerated a number of things that were probably going to happen anyways. You could think of COVID as a giant accelerator. A lot of these are technology-based trends that have now been pushed forward, but there's some other ones too that Mark's going to share with us. Mark, you there with us?
I sure am.
All right, well, let's talk about some of these things.
Well, I think that the big one that's going to happen so far that's going to be accelerated is just this adoption of off-premise ordering and eating. And it's not as if that wasn't already happening a little bit. You know, the use of drive-throughs and, you know, more carry out and off-premise was kind of migrating from quick service to other parts of the industry. You know, you think that if Panera Bread and Chipotle were adding drive-through lanes before, well, now I think that that's going to accelerate post-COVID, and probably some more fast casuals or, you know, casual dining chains might also get in on that trend too. But then it was also kind of a big boon initially for people that were already pretty good at off-premise and digital and carry out. So you think about guys like Wingstop and the pizza chains. You know, that's one place where this is really going to accelerate. On the right side of the chart. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Josh.
I think, yeah, to your point, we're thinking that, you know, some people are saying, yeah, I don't see myself eating inside of a restaurant as much anymore, but we think that gap will probably close in the long run, right?
Oh, yeah. I think over the long term, it definitely will. But where we sit right now, you know, we're still months away from a treatment or a vaccine. And so coming out of this, at least in the near term, yeah, we'll see some decline in on-premise eating. But, you know, I think that delta will shrink a little bit.
But is it the order at the counter is the one that I thought was always more interesting. I feel like that gap there, it'll probably recede a little bit, but it won't go back to even, because what we've accelerated is all that ordering ahead behavior, which probably would have happened anyways, but we've just like supercharged that.
Yeah, well, and that was one thing that was kind of, I think, in motion a little bit too, where, you know, you think about some of the real leading fast casual chains that were starting to do, you know, digital only products where you could only order these things through their branded apps, for instance. And I think that you know, is something that's going to probably pick up speed.
Yep. Yeah.
And so, boop.
I love phone pay. What do we know about it?
Well, you know, this stat that's highlighted here in red is pretty staggering. You know, I think that this is 1 in 6 people that have started to, you know, adopt NFC or contactless payment with their phones in the past, 8 to 10 weeks. I mean, that's a kind of a staggering adoption curve right there. And the way that I think about it is that, well, first of all, this is just, you know, contactless payment with the phone, you know, with like an Apple Pay or a Google Pay. I don't think this includes people using a restaurant app that has your card stored in it.
No, this is the Apple Pay, Google Pay type of thing here.
Yeah, so I think that we're seeing even more, you know, contactless payment if you broaden the universe a little bit and think about all that. You know, personally, I haven't done the thing where you double tap your phone and just, you know, hold it up to a reader and it links your debit card. I use restaurant apps with that all the time, but
you don't use the thing where you just wave your phone and you're done?
No, I for whatever reason, I'm still.
It's so awesome. Why wouldn't you do that? It's the best.
You know, Jack, I'm slow with this kind of stuff. I'm still rocking the iPhone 6S. You know, I'm incredibly cheap, so.
Wait,
you know,
we're on iPhone 11 and due for iPhone 12 now. Are you literally your phone's 6 years old?
Yeah, still works.
Okay,
still works.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's like an analog to, you know, my grandparents growing up in the Depression and never throwing anything away. Maybe that's something going on right now. But
you know, we've had NFC since, I don't know, 2015 or something like that. And
yeah,
1/3 of people in those 5 years started using it. In just the last 3 months, half as many of those jumped on board. That's pretty quick acceleration. And once you start using it, it really is fantastic. So I would recommend that you join the red chart.
Okay, boss, I will. But you made a good point, Jack. You know, this is one thing that maybe people were starting to do this because of concerns out of, limiting touching surfaces and sanitation, but at its core, contactless payment and NFC, that's just purely all about convenience.
Yeah.
And so why go back?
Yeah, and it really is convenient. It's fantastic.
Yeah. All right, honk.
And delivery, contactless delivery.
So contactless delivery, this one is pretty new throughout the pandemic. I mean, even the most kind of tech forward and forward thinking delivery specialists like the pizza players, they really hadn't done too much with contactless delivery yet. But when that became a priority, when we're concerned about our health, it began with people like Domino's and Pizza Hut, but it's really all across the industry right now as we're more of a delivery and carry out model. And, this is one that is purely about, safety, sanitation. But I do think that's going to have a lot of staying power because it also is kind of convenient.
I like it more, right? I think like the delivery services thought, we're going to offer a really great customer experience, and you meet your driver and like, just leave the food. It's so much easier.
Totally.
I would personally prefer this in the long run as well. So,
I might be an edge case, but I think that where it's been really great for me, this contactless delivery, is that if my wife and I are ordering food kind of later at night, like a little bit after we put our kids down to bed, and we don't want the doorbell to ring, and we've got 2 big dogs that'll go nuts and wake everybody up, contactless this week has been great for that. So there are these little convenience edge cases that pop up all the time with that.
Absolutely.
All right, Auga.
Yeah.
All right. So
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I would say, I've actually heard from some grocery chains and whatnot that have said, hey, we're not so comfortable with that self-serve salad bar, so we're moving toward more automated solutions like Sally the salad robot from Chowbotics, which makes a pretty mean salad instead. But are we hearing anything else around automation that we think is accelerated by virtue of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, so I think that these kinds of next generation vending machines that we're seeing, you had mentioned this is good for, a prepared foods section in a supermarket or a convenience store. But you think about a lot of different on-site segments that really had come to depend on self-serving food stations to, move a big line of people through at one big rush time. When that's seen as, more of a risk, I think that might drive adoption of these sorts of technologies in a lot of on-site segments too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then across the wider industry, certainly the move toward ordering kiosks were, that was a trend that, you really couldn't get away from the last couple of years. It probably will pick up some steam, in the months ahead, where if you have to reopen your restaurant with, fewer people and a tighter labor model, then I think that's a case where some of these kiosks might make a lot of sense. But it's all nuanced, right? Because if you're touching all these things to order, and there's a line of 20 people, lining up to touch the stuff to place their orders, those concerns are going to be there as well. So that's one that we're going to have to keep in tension.
Yeah. The automation thing was going to happen anyways. Like these types of solutions were, I think, clearly already going to come in. The other thing, as you said, that is automation, but we don't often think of it because it's not like a physical robot with arms or anything. Just this, right? Think of how many orders are now placed on this, whereas it used to be placed with a person in some way. We've totally just sped that up because people are finding this to be quite convenient to just do it on your phone. There's a salad chain nearby me where you can only go in the store to pick up your order, and you can only order by using the app to construct your salad, right? So that's, that used to be a human interaction, and now it's an automated, robotic interaction via your phone instead. So
there's a location here at Wow that you could probably run that place with nobody working in the dining room. It could just be the back of house kitchen staff, because it's all it's all phone or kiosk ordering. There's no cashier, and they just put your food in a cubby when it's ready. There's some seating in there, but for the most part, it's a purely carry out operation.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Mark. I will real quickly talk about our fourth major lesson, which is just that location really is everything. It's probably one of the things that's not talked about nearly as much, but you almost have to think about location on sort of a very microscopic scale. So here's some analysis you may have seen from us before, but I think it bears repeating. It comes from our Firefly service, which is a data set of every place that serves food in the country. And we can learn some things about restaurant opening and closure rates. One, we know that restaurants closed far more often in urban areas than they did in suburban or rural areas during the pandemic, right? The urban areas got hit hardest. But the story does not end there. It's not just an urban story. It's not just a state story. You have to get a little bit more specific, right? So if you look at New York City, this is a zip code map. Each of the boundary lines is a different zip code, and we've color coded this by whether restaurants are open or closed there. And you can see the closure rates are just much stronger in those Manhattan zip codes versus the rest of New York City. And you see this is true of places like Chicago as well, where restaurants are pretty much open in the suburbs, but when you get downtown over here, sort of to the right, and specifically when you get into the Loop, which is where all the big office buildings are, closure rates are sort of off the charts. So we developed a special stat that we call the variable population ratio, which is the number of people that work in an area divided by the number of people that live in an area. So if you don't have many people that live there and you have a lot of people that work there, you have a really high variable population ratio. And you can look at the 25 zip codes across the country that have the highest variable population ratios, right? How many people live there? How many people work there? What's that ratio? And the next column over is the closure rate of restaurants in those zip codes compared to the US average of 11.5%. So in these zip codes with high variable population, you're talking 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, sometimes 5 times the national average in terms of closure rates. So even within a specific city, it depends really on like that super local area, that zip, that block, that really determines what the roadmap to recovery looks like for restaurants and other places that rely on consumers for business. If we're talking about areas where we've just sort of sucked people entirely out of the economy, right? People not going into the office to work, that's the thing that makes it really challenging for restaurants and other food places. It's primarily just an economic, equation story. It's actually not so much about public health. It's, are there enough customers that we could draw from? And, it seems like it's a pretty, intuitive thing and just, obvious thing to say, but it wasn't really said very much until we actually sort of really looked into these numbers. So I would say, as you think about your business, if you're an operator or a retailer, or if you're a supplier to the industry, you want to think about where you are or where your customers are. If they have lots of stores in these types of super high variable population areas, those are the ones that are going to be most under pressure. If we're talking about mostly stores out in the suburbs or in rural areas, then those are going to be much more likely to have already recovered or to recover at a faster pace than other types of places. And we see this, right? So specialties, I think they had something like 50 units, and they're, it's a great concept. And their idea was, hey, we want to be in downtown areas near all the office buildings. That's our market. We're gonna cater to those businesses as well. That model just didn't work. I mean, they were sadly a victim of their location. It's going to be a long time before some of those areas come back. It's not about the cities they were in. It's not about the states they were in. It was literally about the block of the street that they were on, and the fact that it's, we don't have a lot of office workers all of a sudden. The potential number of consumers to serve shrunk by 80% virtually overnight, and they had to close, not just temporarily, but to close their entire system down permanently. So we lose another great brand through all of this. And you want to keep in mind that there will probably be some long-term implications as well. The pandemic may not last forever, but we've probably learned very quickly in the first week or two of this that we can actually work from home and be pretty productive still, right? Think about your companies and where you work, and do you have a target date for going back to the office yet? Maybe. Or are you like one of those companies where maybe you won't be back in the office until the end of the year? Or are you like Twitter, where your company has said you could work from home forever if you want? we'll probably see a long-term systemic decline in the number of people that actually go physically into work, right? Maybe companies offered, 2 days work from home or some sort of policy like that, which means that restaurants and other businesses in those areas, those, downtowns, let's say, with all the office buildings, those will be a little bit different going forward, right? There's going to be less people to serve in those areas all of a sudden. They may go from lunchtime establishments, right, all the fast casual places, to maybe things that are more suitable for dinner, as some of that real estate turns from, let's say, office buildings into things like condos in the long run. So think about location. It really is going to make a difference. Mike, Renee, I'd like to bring you back in and talk about the fifth major lesson, which is just that I think by any measure that we've seen, and we certainly agree with this, that trends will continue to blast ahead at full speed. So I'm going to do the first boop, and then why don't you just jump right on in?
Yeah, and I think, that's something we were being asked a lot about, especially in the early days of the pandemic, when everything seemed, like it was up in the air and kind of anything was possible. Are the trends that we had talked about for years kind of dead in the water? And this is a total reset, and we kind of have to rethink everything again. I think now we kind of realize that, that's not the case, that trends will continue. And this is a question that we asked, of consumers. Of those that are interested in this trend prior to coronavirus, how many of them think that they'll still be interested after the pandemic? And you can see here that for almost everything here, consumers say that they're going to still be interested. And I think even those ones that kind of fall to the bottom, which are still strong percentages, 72, 73%, some of that I think is even less pandemic related and just, they're maybe a little bit tired of Instagrammable foods and trends like that. So just maybe that kind of natural life cycle of that trend, not even related to.
Is TikTokable food a thing now? Have we just?
No, that's what I was thinking when we tested this. Yeah, it is. There's quite a few food personalities on TikTok too.
Yeah.
Boop.
And I think you could argue that, and actually we really do believe this, some of these things have actually maybe been accelerated even by virtue of the pandemic. I mean, think about plant-based as an example. Second week of the pandemic, empty meat cases at the grocery store, people go in, they can't find like the normal thing they were going to buy, and they're like, oh, what's this thing that's left over, this strange plant-based thing I've been hearing about. They try it, they like it, and now they're on that plant-based train. And some of these will not just only resume, but grow at a faster rate, we think, coming out of all this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Starbucks just, announced that they're going to add plant-based meats to the breakfast menu. So that's a great example of on the operator side, how many operators think that trends are going to be important in the future. So we asked this question as well. You can see over 80% of operators say that trends are either going to be equally as important as they were prior to coronavirus, or there's a good percentage there, over a quarter, say they're going to be more important after COVID is over.
Yeah, a net preponderance saying more important compared to less important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can see already that a lot of operators are innovating and continuing ahead with trends. So this is Dalgona, I never know if I say that right, but whipped coffee, which was all over Instagram, social media. I made it several times. It really is very magical. And now Foxtrot Market here in Chicago has added it to their permanent lineup. So just one example of kind of capitalizing on what people are making at home and putting it as a nice little LTO.
For those who don't know what this is, can you tell us what this is?
Yeah, so it's just, it's water, sugar, and instant coffee. It has to be instant coffee crystals. You just whip it up for 5-10 minutes and it like froths up like magic. So it's this whipped Korean coffee that it was based on.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's super fun. Look it up. And then this, I'm super excited because I love White Claw. It's one of my favorite things. And Blaze Pizza actually just came out with this White Claw pizza. So it actually has mango White Claw in the crust to kind of give it that little tangy edge. So just an example of people who are still innovating. And, this made quite a splash, I feel, not just to me, but it was all over the news. So just people who are still innovating right now are kind of being early adopters and getting a lot of that attention.
And this is very recent, right? This just hit, I think.
Yeah, and it was only available for one day, which was super sad, and I wasn't able to get it. But it was also promoting the fact that they now have White Claw as a beverage option too.
Yeah, we'll see if it comes back. That's awesome.
Yeah. And, you know, kind of going off of what you were saying, Jack, about, you know, alternative plant-based stuff. Now alt foods is also one of those categories that kind of just exploded almost out of nowhere. If you go to the next slide, boop. You know, a lot of classic foods, you know, we started with a lot of obviously dairy milk, just like olive oil, you know, very kind of classic things that all of a sudden were being reinvented. And now there's all these, you know, all types of oat milk and everything like that. So just kind of also, I think when people aren't seeing the dairy milk and they might see an alternative, they're also reaching for that. But I'm not actually the health expert by any means, so I'm going to throw it over to my girl Marie, because she is definitely the health expert.
Aw, thank you, Renee. Yeah, so I'm happy to jump in here. So, you know, we've certainly seen a shift in how consumers are eating post-pandemic, but, you know, one trend that was very much of interest to consumers before the pandemic, that is eating foods that have functional health benefits for us, has continued post-pandemic too, and really only gained momentum over the past several months. So building on that, we've tracked with consumers in our research here sort of what were your healthy lifestyle goals back in, you know, February, 3, 4, 5 months ago, and then what are your goals today? And we really see two things gain in prominence, which to me, they definitely speak to the same thing, and that's boosting our immunity. So making sure we have a healthy immune system. I think, you know, avoiding cancer. Cancer is inherently suppressant of our immune system. So this idea of just making sure our immunity is in great shape right now. Conversely, what we don't need as much of is maybe an increase in energy, which certainly speaks to how all of us are probably spending quite a lot more time at home these days and don't need to maybe make our commutes, or maybe we're sleeping in a little longer. So energy is less of interest to us, but what we're really honing in on is having a strong immune system.
Yeah, and it's notable, these are really big changes for just a 3-month period too, right? We're not talking about years, you know, we're talking 3 months from February to May, this big of a jump.
For sure. Yeah, so, you know, when we think about how we help consumers on their quest to have a healthy immune system, so here we're seeing foods that consumers believe are good for our immune system, which as a dietitian, I'm happy to see this list. I think consumers are largely on target here. We know that citrus fruits and dark leafy greens and mushrooms and lots of plant foods here are great for immune boosting nutrients like vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc and other things. But, you know, certainly a nod to plant-based, but meat shouldn't be forgotten either. Meat is very high in zinc and important nutrients for immunity. So, you know, a couple of questions we've gotten from manufacturers and operators who are innovating against these immune boosting foods is how do we talk about it and market it and communicate what we're doing around these efforts. And one strategy for that is to speak to the nutrients themselves that have been identified as crucial for our immune system. And that's happily what consumers know as well to be true. So vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc and selenium, people know that these are good for us and they'll help us to stay healthy during these times.
Yeah, and I will say, I was actually shocked that people were this aware. I figured people would have no idea at all. The fact that this many people voted in even any particular direction, I think is a very positive sign that we are educating ourselves these days.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that, Marie. How about this? What do blueberries have to do with it?
So blueberries have an important role. So recently we interviewed Dr. Justine Horn for our COVID library on our website, and she has just published a scientific research paper about nutrition as related to COVID. So what dietary interventions can make a difference and really help decrease severity of COVID should we contract coronavirus. So what those two things are increased intake of resveratrol and decreased intake of dietary fat. So resveratrol is a type of antioxidant, and it's found in berries and dark chocolate and peanuts and red wine. And, you know, Dr. Horn did mention that it's probably not the excessive red wine intake that will help us here, but that eating more berries and, you know, dark chocolate and some nuts and things during this time might be helpful for us in reducing severity of coronavirus.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. Amanda, I'd like to bring you in real quickly, if we can, and
Yeah.
just talk quickly about how operators are in this unprecedented mindset of change that we've never seen before.
Yeah, I think all of us are really starkly aware of how hard the food service industry has been hit. And kind of at the center of that is, of course, the food service operators who are running our restaurants and our on-site locations. And so the big thing that came first was that decrease in demand. And so operators aren't able to order as much food because they don't have as many customers anymore. So they really need to shy away from fresh items that are going to go bad. You know, in order to hit their purchase minimums, they may need to only order once a week where they used to order twice. And so they need things that are going to hold up over the long term to make sure that, you know, the products that they're ordering match up with the demand that they're going to see from customers. And if you want to move to the next slide, Jack, the other big thing that we saw come out of this, of course, was that you don't need staff either. You don't need product and you don't need the staff to cook it because you just don't have as many customers. And with those layoffs, you know, operators are losing staff that they may have had, prep cooks they may have had for 5 or 10 years, spending all of this time developing their back of house protocol, making sure that people know how to make their favorite sauce or, you know, their key appetizer dish. And all of that talent has been lost, with operators laying off 75% in some cases of their staff and having a really hard time getting them back. And so what you see here is almost 40% of operators saying that they're going to need more convenience-focused products, because even if they do get staff back, it probably won't be at 100%, and it may not be the staff that they had beforehand. And so, you know, this may not seem like a huge number, but if you think about the amount of times you could ask a restaurant operator, are you going to change the way that you make this classic thing back of house? The answer is always no. You know, we test pre-made soup bases and sauce starters, and you get this segment of operators who are like, we know what we're doing, we've got an amazing staff, we don't need help. But I think that that has all shifted from this pandemic, and we see that too on the next slide. You know, an interest in things that are single serve. So it's something really easy for the staff back of house to just open up, cook. It kind of takes away some of that prep work, and additionally it prevents waste as well. You know, operators are having a really hard time forecasting demand. I think we see, you know, day by day things shift. You know, just today Florida's closing up a little bit more, Texas is as well, so definitely help there to potentially switch to single serve. And you know, with this state of flux, operators don't know what they're going to do. You know, some are going to return to using those original products, but many might stick with the new or have no idea what they're going to do. So if you're a manufacturer and you've lost or won ground during this period, this summer is really going to be the time that you need to cement that change. And I think we see that play out on the next slide really, really well. The blue bar here is when restaurants expect to be reopened, but the pink is when they expect traffic to be back to normal. So there's that huge gap where operators know they're going to be open, but they don't think that they're going to get back to that 100% capacity that they're accustomed to. So, you know, we'll see restaurant operators being really scrappy and really needing your help this summer as they just work to get their profits back up to normal levels. And I think this last slide just underlines that.
I want to stop you for a second. I mean, such a good point. This is the window, right? The window is between now, when places are basically opening back up, and sometime after September when traffic comes back. There's so much flux right now. You could influence so many operator decisions. They're literally switching formats of product, which they would never normally do. If you're a supplier to the industry, you could have that consultative conversation with the operator and get them to consider why your product is a better solution. That whole objection of, I'm good with what I have, that's been taken off the table entirely. But you only have a few months to do this. By the time we get to October, November, that cement is dried, I think, essentially. Yep. So you got to go after it right now. And tell us about this last important stat.
Yeah, and I think this just underlines that point in a really final way. You know, we asked operators when they're ready to talk to manufacturers and distributors about new products, and the answer is right now. Over half saying that this summer is the time they want to be talking about that. A large portion ready in September. Very few operators saying that that's a conversation they want to have later on. They know they need your help and they know they need it right now.
Yeah, so that is probably one of the big lessons, just engage immediately. Amanda, thank you. And for the last piece, I'd like to bring in Colleen, who's also amazing. And you know, if you think about what's happened throughout the course of the pandemic, us as just people and those around us, and whether they're customers or vendors or friends and family, we've all just been through like fucking hell together. And we don't want that to be lost. I think that is the thing that we will all remember in the end, is that we've come together as people. And that's a seventh lesson, is keep the whole thing human. Colleen?
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of take a moment, circle all the way back to where we started at the beginning of this crisis together. Is it's about coming together, the relationships we've forged, the sacrifice, the dedication. Next slide. I think we can't forget, as we start to pave our way forward and we're thinking about our business needs every single day, is to not lose sight of not just our employees, but all those that have been taking care of us. And if you look at the next slide, you see how consumers have been reacting in thanks, grace, and gratitude to our healthcare workers, but also to our industry. On the next slide. Our industry, like no one else's, hospitality, we are the heartbeat of service and grace and thankfulness and honestly feeding everyone's hearts, minds, and souls. And I just want to shout out to all our friends out there who have tirelessly been working to either support and feed their unemployed staff, food banks, pivoting their establishments to service the consumer in times where shelves were empty. This industry, like no other, is not just innovative and creative around menu items, but fostering and nurturing each other through food and connection and human, just the humanity of it all, to be honest. And so as we start to really drill into how we survive in the new norm, whether it be our supply chains and our menus and our pricing and promotion and marketing, just don't forget that this story has been about people all along. It's what you do. It's what makes you amazing. It's what's going to power you into the future. And with that, we thank you so very much for the community that you forged here with us every single Friday.
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. And that is it. This ultimately is a human story. Yes, it's a political story and an economic story and a public health story. What people are going to remember in the long run, consumers, partners, etc. This really whole thing, it was just a human story. Let's not lose sight of that. As a reminder, since the start of the pandemic, Datassential surveyed now over 65,000 consumers and operators about coronavirus and the impact on the industry and what we should all be doing to advance ourselves and recover as quickly as we can. We've made all of that available completely for free on our COVID microsite. If you haven't had a chance, please go there. You'll find over 80, I think now it's like 84 different traffic briefings, reports, interviews, opening maps, pretty much everything you need. And it's completely free of charge to use. We hope you use it, share it, spread the insight, and we think together that'll help everybody recover more quickly. I did want to say thank you not just to all of you, but also to our staff at Datassential. You met several of them that are just really awesome today, but there's so many more. We pivoted as a company in early March to say, what can we do to serve the industry and get good quality information out there? And everyone's really worked their ass off to do it. So thank you to the Datassential team. And thank you to all of you that have been joining and spending time with us. I would like to make an ask, which is as you get back to your business and start working on new projects and things really get going again, if you have a need, we do hope that you pick up the phone, call us, and see how we might be able to help you. We need your support as well. And we'd love to unleash all of the awesome talent and tools that we have to help your business. A couple of reminders on some things that you may find helpful right now. There's over 10,000 chains in the country, not just 500, not just 1,000, there's over 10,000 of them. If you're looking to engage with them, we have the most awesome data set and profiles and menus and social media and news and everything else you want to know about those potential customers. If you're a supplier in a product called Firefly Chains, reach out to us. We'll be happy to tell you more about it. We've updated our brand fingerprints platform to include new pandemic recovery metrics for the top chain restaurants, the top C stores, the top retailers, all focused on You know, do consumers trust this place? Do they think that these are safe brands to visit? Is the menu something that will hold up well coming out of a pandemic? Do they feel these brands have been responsible, you know, stewards of the community? Things that will matter as the recovery process moves forward. So if you have an interest in understanding what this means on an individual brand basis, please let us know. And if you're interested in trends, we have a ton of amazing trend resources because trends will keep moving forward. And finally, if you want to do an examination of your specific company or your specific category, we offer really awesome custom research services. We'd love to help you with that too. But again, thank you so much. We will be back on July 9th with brand new content. Again, that is a Thursday. It's not a Friday. July 9th at 12 p.m. Central. And we will see you there. And again, thanks again for joining us for the past several webinars. We are moving forward, and I think the future is really quite exciting. Thanks, everybody.